thought about doing this review in a toga, but I thought, nah, that's doing too much.
What can I say except you're welcome for the tides, the sun, the sky. Hey, it's okay.
It's just another day on the Enterprise. Scotty's quite taken with the Enterprise's anthropology officer, Lieutenant Carolyn Palomas, which Kirk and Bones, the ship's gossipy old ladies, can't help but rib him about. Bones makes a comment that eventually Palomas will find herself a husband and leave Starfleet to be a housewife, as is the fate of all women who enlist in the fleet, which is a rather telling reflection on 1960s attitudes about women in the workforce. It's also unintended foreshadowing about Palomas' arc in the episode. The Enterprise approaches a planet called Pollux IV, an unassuming M-class planet that is devoid of life. If you're playing the home game, that means that the crew of the Enterprise will 100% encounter life on the planet. Sure enough, a giant ghostly green hand made of energy appears in space before them and grabs hold of the ship. Fun fact, that hand belongs to the great bird himself, Gene Roddenberry. Then, the head of a man wearing a laurel wreath on his head appears to them.
You are most welcome, my beloved children.
Kirk is having none of it, demanding his ship be released. The apparition responds with a show of force, squeezing the hull until Kirk begs him to stop. The apparition then bids them to beam down to the planet and join him, but to leave Spock behind because he's a nerd. When the landing party gets down to the surface, the apparition introduces himself as none other than Greek deity of the sun, Apollo.
And I am the Tsar of all the Russias. Sorry, Captain.
Apollo claims that thousands of years ago, he and the other gods of myth visited Earth and helped mold the early human civilizations. But since having left Earth eons ago, Apollo misses being revered by humanity, so he commands the crew of the Enterprise to stay here and worship him. When Kirk tells him that they're leaving, Apollo cuts off their communicators and gives them a demonstration of his godly power. He shortly disappears, and Kirk expresses skepticism that Apollo is really a god. Of course, it wouldn't be the first time the Enterprise has encountered an alien race with godlike abilities. However, Kirk does theorize that Apollo really did once visit Earth thousands of years ago with his fellow gods, and their technology was so advanced that it appeared to the ancient Greeks as divine magic. Star Trek basically predicted the History Channel's programming 50 years early. Apollo quickly reappears and says that in return for the crew's eternal worship, they'll be able to chill in paradise with him forever. Apollo clearly takes a shine to Palomas, giving her a fancy new getup and cucking Scotty right to his face.
You seem wise for a woman.
And the casual sexism keeps on truckin'. Side note, that dress had to be glued to actress Leslie Parrish's body and apparently tore off pieces of skin when it was removed. But hey, we got side boobs, so I guess it was worth it. Back on the ship, the crew is trying unsuccessfully to break out of the hand's grip and make contact with the landing party. Sulu detects an energy source on the planet's surface and Spock orders him to pinpoint its origin.
A simple process of elimination.
The whole planet, sir? Yes, sir. The whole planet.
Apollo takes Palomas for a romantic walk and reveals to her that the other gods disappeared long ago, as humanity grew more secular and started seeing them as figures of legend rather than deities. Apollo seems to imply that gods only have as much power as their followers believe of them. When Apollo returns to the men without Palomas, they become enraged and Apollo incapacitates Scotty and Kirk. He again disappears, and Chekhov notes that Apollo seemingly becomes weakened whenever he puts on a great display of strength, suggesting that his power isn't infinite. Kirk suggests provoking Apollo again once he comes back to try and drain his power enough to be able to jump him. However, Palomas intervenes and talks Apollo down when he prepares to strike Kirk, having been unaware of the plan. Apollo relents and tells Kirk to start bringing down the rest of the crew. He can't understand why Kirk and the others are resisting his generous offer.
I offer you more than your wildest dreams have ever imagined. You'll become the mother of a new race of gods. And I shall love you for time without end, worlds without end. You shall complete me, and I you.
Apollo, you simp, you've known her for like 20 minutes. Kirk comes up with one last plan, if he can get Palomas on board. He asks Palomas to break Apollo's heart, to break his spirit so he can't hold them prisoner any longer.
I love him.
Again! 20 minutes! Palomas is like, but you don't know him like I do, and Kirk, being the romantic he is like, girl, I get it. His lack of nipples is very attractive, but bish. He cray. Dump his ass. This is yet another instance of one of the Enterprise's female officers being forced to choose between a man she loves and her duty as a Starfleet officer. Chapel, Elizabeth Daner, Marla McIvers. For the most part, they usually choose duty over love. Sure, McIvers ultimately goes with Khan, but not before betraying him and rescuing Kirk from certain death. Star Trek is ultimately a boys' club, but the women aren't completely two-dimensional. Credit where credit is due, the women of Star Trek have pretty strong moral fortitude, and Palomas is no exception. Even though it hurts, she agrees to break the god's heart for the good of her crew and goes to Apollo. Uhura jerry-rigs a bypass channel and gets in touch with the landing party. Side note, this is one of the many things that the reboot movies gets wrong. Uhura wears engineering red instead of command gold for a reason, and it's not because Nichelle Nichols just looks fabulous in red, which she does. Uhura is an engineer. She works with tech. If she was just a translator, she would wear gold like Kirk. As a matter of fact, what's the point of a translation officer when universal translation technology is readily available? Women in STEM! Spock and Sulu have deduced that Apollo's energy source originates from the columned pavilion right next to them, and can destroy it with their phasers, breaking his hold on the ship. Meanwhile, Palomas straight up murders Apollo.
Well, surely you know I've only been studying you.
You love me.
Love you? Be logical. Well, I could no more love you than I could love a new species of bacteria.
Emotional, damn it!
Apollo is left reeling by her rejection and throws a weather tantrum. He almost finishes her in his godly wrath, but the Enterprise fires on the pavilion, destroying the source of his power. Rendered weak and utterly devastated, Apollo speaks.
I would have cherished you, cared for you. Did I ask so much?
Left with nothing, Apollo calls on his fellow deities to take him with them, to join them in the godly afterlife, and fades away. Kirk and Bones are like, damn, R.I.P. Episode over. You know, the Percy Jackson fan in me wants to gush about this episode, but the film critic in me knows it's not very well done. The writing is just kind of slapdash, more like a patchwork quilt of scraps than an intricately woven tapestry of storytelling. Kirk and the boys don't have much to do except for wait around for Apollo to show up to get what little plot there is moving. I don't know how they managed to stretch this into a full 50-minute episode. It's a fun little story if you like Greek mythology, but if you're still on the fence about watching the original series, give it a skip. One element the episode has going for it is Michael Forrest, the actor who plays Apollo. His performance manages to be a perfect balance of Shakespearean and campy, right in that sweet spot you want for an episode of Star Trek. Apparently the producers wanted Jon Voight for the role, but he was already engaged. Michael Forrest had already worked with Leonard Nimoy on an episode of the Western show Laramie, where they played brothers, and they also did a film together called Death Watch in 1965, which I can only describe as a gay love triangle in prison. According to Forrest, when filming the episode, William Shatner refused any shots that framed him and Forrest together. That's why Forrest is often framed alone, and the reverse shot is Kirk in The Boys. Apparently, the Shat Man was so insecure about Forrest's 5-inch height advantage over him that he refused to stand next to him on camera. Forrest even claimed that Shatner stood on tiptoe when talking to him. Can you say Napoleon complex?
There is no issue with me being 5'1". Just because I'm short doesn't mean that I don't have emotional maturity. Don't ever try to shame me over my height again.
The name Who Mourns for Adonis comes from a poem by Percy Shelley, a tribute for the death of poet John Keats. Shelley eulogizes about a man who died alone and forgotten, with no mourners at his side, and the narrator calls upon Adonis's mother to rise and lament, and pleads with the audience to sing of him, to honor his memory. The word Adonis also serves double duty as being the anglicized plural form of the Hebrew word for God, Adonai. In the Amok Time review, I talked a bit about how Leonard Nimoy's Jewish heritage helped shape Vulcan culture, so the episode title could be translated as Who Mourns for the Gods. Which brings me to my main focus for this video, religion in Star Trek. And no, I don't mean the Christine Chapel. As with most big ideas in Star Trek, we have to go back to the Great Bird himself. Despite his Southern Baptist upbringing, Gene Roddenberry was a self-identified atheist, and this is reflected in the mostly a-religious culture of Star Trek, at least in the original series and The Next Generation. Roddenberry's vision for humanity in the future, at least as it's portrayed in Star Trek, was having moved beyond spiritual ideology. Brannon Braga, writer and producer for multiple Star Trek projects, was quoted as saying, "In Gene Roddenberry's imagining of the future, religion is completely gone. This was an important part of Roddenberry's mythology. He himself was a secular humanist, and made it well known to writers of Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation that religion and superstition and mythical thinking were not to be a part of his universe. On Roddenberry's future Earth, everyone is an atheist, and that world is the better for it. That's not to say there is no religion in Star Trek, as fans of Deep Space Nine can attest to. There are several highly religious races in Star Trek like the Bajorans, but the world of Star Trek is highly secularized. Mentions of any religious beliefs from human characters is fleeting. For example, in this very episode, Kirk challenges Apollo's declaration of dominion by claiming that humanity is fine with the one God. Whether he means the Christian God, Allah, the flying spaghetti monster, is left to the viewer's imagination. Personally, I've always headcanoned Kirk as Jewish since William Shatner is Jewish. Who Mourns dips its toe into the paleo-contact theory, this idea that some of humanity's greatest achievements were accomplished by alien visitors to our planet long, long ago, and that ancient civilizations saw their superior technology as the power of the gods. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Who Mourns aired in September of 1967, the year before Swiss novelist Erich von Däniken published his first book, Chariot of the Gods? Which suggests that extraterrestrial beings influenced ancient technology. I wonder if he's a Star Trek fan. The premise for this episode really leans on the immortal quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, "God is dead," which is the inspiration for a quadrilogy of shitty propaganda films, but also a statement on the way humanity rationalizes scary existential ideas like being and mortality by inventing religion as means of coping. Where does my soul go when I die? I don't just cease to be, do I? No, surely not. There must be an Elysium waiting for me, an eternal resting place where all my loved ones will be waiting for me, and David Bowie and Marilyn Monroe will totally want to have a threesome with me. Just as a general example. Now, I'm merely interpreting Nietzschean philosophy in an academic sense. I am not personally a nihilist, nor am I telling you to become an atheist. I myself am religious, and I think that faith will always have a role to play in society. But nihilism is important in understanding the root of the episode, as well as how it reflects Trek's secularized view of the future. When quoting the phrase, "God is dead," a lot of people leave out the rest of the sentence. The full quote is, "God is dead, and we have killed him." This is how Nietzsche summarized the role that philosophy plays in a world that is moving more and more towards secularization. Nietzsche was a philosopher who came about in the wake of the Age of Enlightenment, a time when the great minds of the world were becoming more focused on science and reason, and many philosophers of the time rejected viewing the world through the dominant religious lens.
God's not real. When you die, you're dead.
Nietzsche saw belief in a higher power as a philosophical crutch, and believed that humanity would inevitably move beyond it someday in the future. And this episode seems to reinforce that. Apollo demands worship, and the crew of the Enterprise simply don't have it in them.
We've outgrown you. You asked for something we can no longer give.
Apollo's implications that the true power of the gods is the faith people put in them is a perfect illustration of Nietzsche's beliefs about the futility of religion itself. Maybe you can't kill an idea, but if no one believes in that idea, it has no power anymore.
The time has passed. There is no room for gods.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I love him.
You love him? You met him Sunday. It's barely Thursday morning. Slow down, crazy. Slow down.
Love makes you crazy.
Save it, Patty Hearst. I'm not buying any Stockholm Syndrome today, thank you. Look at your life. Look at your choices. Have you even slept with this guy?
I did.
You big slut! Good for you! Yay! Come on, you stupid man.